Hello everyone, I am Commander Abhilash Tomy from the Indian Navy, and today I am going to tell you the story of how I sailed around the world alone, without stops, without taking anybody's help between 2012 and 2013. And after that, I'm going to tell you how I tried to repeat this feat and ended up in a very bad accident. The story of Indian single-handed circumnavigation starts with Admiral Manohar Rawati. He made many proposals to the Navy that we should undertake such an expedition, and finally, I believe in 2006, the Navy accepted his proposal. That is how Project Sagar Parikrama 1 was born. Captain Dilip Donde sailed around the world alone with 4 stops, and when he came back to India after 273 days, he became the first Indian and the 175th person in the world to have successfully completed a single-handed circumnavigation. He did so on a boat built in India. The boat's name was INSV Madai. With Captain Dilip Donde's voyage declared a success, the Navy decided to raise the bar higher. This time, the Navy was aiming for a single-handed, non-stop circumnavigation of the Earth. How difficult can it be? A sailor is supposed to start a voyage from a port, sail around the world, cover a distance of 40,000 kilometers or 21,600 nautical miles, which is the length of the equator, and come back to the point where he had started from without stopping anywhere and without taking anybody's help. He had to sail south of the 3 great capes of the southern hemisphere: Cape Leuven in southwest Australia, Cape Horn in South America, and Cape of Good Hope in South Africa. And this route, in which he cannot take any canals, obviously the Panama and Suez canals are out. This route takes the sailor through some of the worst seas that you can think of. They are called the Roaring Forties, the Furious 50s, and the Screaming 60s. Sailors often say that in these places, at 40 degrees south, there are no rules. At 50 degrees south, there are no laws. At 60 degrees south, there are no gods. And at 70 degrees south, even common sense disappears. When you start your voyage, you cross the equator, your temperature is about 35 degrees. When you're rounding Cape Horn, temperatures can be as low as 0 degrees. The seas are very rough, and a sailor not only needs to survive but sustain in these conditions and continue towards sailing towards his destination, making good any repair that needs to be done. If I throw some numbers at you, you might realize how difficult this adventure can be. We've all heard about climbing the Everest. We think it's a difficult task, but let me tell you, almost 6,000 people have summited the Everest. Almost 600 people have gone to space. But till date, the number of people who have successfully undertaken a single-handed, non-stop circumnavigation of the Earth stands at less than 100. That's how difficult it can get. Like I said before, the crucial conditions of this voyage, Sagar Parikrama 2, would be A, the person has to be alone. B, he cannot take anybody's help once he started the voyage. And C, he cannot stop anywhere. If any of these conditions are not met, the voyage is not a success. If my pens stop working and I borrow a pen from a passing ship, that is considered assistance. If I run out of water and I ask for some water from somebody, that is considered assistance. I cannot take anything from anybody and I cannot stop anywhere. These are the major considerations of this voyage. Now, the amount of preparation required for something like this was tremendous and unbelievable. I had to prepare myself, for which I sailed from India to Brazil and back. I sailed to Colombo, I sailed to Mauritius, I sailed to Malaysia and Phuket, and I did a lot of sailings on the west coast of India. If you add all these sailings, I had done more than the circumference of the Earth even before I started my expedition. The boat had to be prepared. This boat had already sailed around the world, and we all knew that she was quite a capable and well-founded boat, but I wanted to improve it further. I wanted it to become more energy efficient. So I added wind generators, solar panels. I changed the way the bilge pumping was done. I added more storage areas in the boat. If there was any part in the boat that I thought was weak, I strengthened that part. The boat was lifted out of water. We cleaned her bottoms and gave her a nice coat of underwater paint, and the boat was fairly ready thanks to tremendous effort by the Navy. At the same time, I had to uh, upgrade my skills. I was sent to Cochin to learn about global maritime distress and safety procedures, search and rescue procedures, a brush up on meteorology, survival, navigation. A whole lot of skills had to be learned. In addition to this, I had to learn how to maintain the engine of the boat, how to maintain the generator, how to maintain the satellite communication system, the navigation systems, how to do basic carpentry work, fiberglass work, aluminum repairs, sail repairs, etc., etc. The effort that went into all this was really tremendous. But you know, apart from all this, I even had to learn how to cook because nourishing myself was one extremely important part of the entire expedition. Now, finally, I had to, after preparing the boat, after preparing myself, I had to pay attention to the stores that I had to carry for the circumnavigation. Like I said, I could not pick up anything after I started the voyage. I needed food that could last 200 days. My brother sent freeze-dried food from New Zealand, which is powdered food. All you need to do is add a little bit of water and it becomes a meal. I had the Defense Food Research Laboratories giving me almost 150 packets of free meals, which was really, really delicious, as I was to discover later. I carried rice, I carried lentils, I carried a lot of snacks, canned fish, etc., etc. My grandfather's pickled shark at his home, and he sent it with me for this expedition. I had almost 600 liters of water in tanks, 300 liters of water in bottles, and I had an RO plant that could convert seawater to fresh water. I also had to carry spares and tools for every item in the boat. I need to carry spares and tools for the engine, for its servicing, and in case there were some repairs required, for the generator, for all the electronics, for the woodwork, for the toilet, for the satellite communication system, just about anything that you can think of. Finally, the boat was ready, I was ready, and we were cast off by Admiral Shekhar Sinha on the 1st of November 2012 from right under the Gateway of India. I sailed out into a sea that looked very calm and benign. But let me tell you, there's a saying among sailors, those who go to sea for pleasure go to hell for pastime. The next day itself, I was struck by a very bad cyclone. Its name was Neelam. It had killed a lot of people in Tamil Nadu coast, and it was now coming into the Arabian Sea. Now, what I want to tell you is that for a sailor at sea, wind is currency. Thanks to this cyclone, I was a very rich man, and I was able to put a lot of distance between myself and Mumbai very quickly. But I ran out of winds as soon as I approached Kerala coast, and it really appeared to me as if the coast of Kerala was not willing to let go of me. I would wait for winds and pick up whatever winds I could get and make whatever little headway I could. It almost took another week for me to reach the coast of Sri Lanka from where the winds were much steadier. And like that, I headed south, crossed the equator for the first time in this expedition on the 16th of November 2012. After crossing the equator, I intercepted the trade winds, headed south, crossed the Tropic of Capricorn, where I was greeted by the westerlies. The westerlies took me eastward. I crossed the Great Australian Bight and I was off New Zealand when a big storm hit the boat. For the first time in my voyage, winds were more than 50 knots, and it was a very scary experience to be out there alone at sea in those few days. Something very interesting happened on the 31st of December 2012. I was so close to the international dateline that I was probably the first Indian to welcome 2013. At 6 in the morning, on the 1st of January 2012, I crossed the international dateline and I had to shift my clock backwards by 24 hours, and I went back into the 31st of December 2012 all over again. Like that, I believe I also became the last Indian to bid farewell to 2012. I think that was a unique record that I created by becoming the first Indian to welcome 2013. and also the last Indian to bid farewell to 2012. It was in the Pacific that we left the comforts of the roaring 40s, we sailed into the furious 50s, and we touched the screaming 60s. At the end of the Pacific transit lay Cape Horn. Now, Cape Horn is Cape Horn. We sailors don't have words to describe what Cape Horn is, so we just call it the Everest of the oceans. It is such an important cape to round that if you rounded it on a sailboat, you're allowed two distinct privileges. You're allowed to wear an earring on the ear that face Cape Horn, and you're allowed to keep 1 foot on the dining table whenever you have a meal. Cape Horn is such an important cape that I wanted to round it on a day that would be important to me personally as well as to the country. Now, before I started my expedition, I was doing some rough calculations and I realized that I would be rounding Cape Horn only by the first week of February. But when we were crossing the Pacific, I took a lot of risks, pushed the boat really hard, and made it to Cape Horn finally on the 26th of January 2013. That day, on a Republic Day, I hoisted the national flag just 1 mile south of Cape Horn. That day also happened to be the wedding anniversary of my parents, and I called them for the first time in 86 days. I spoke to my parents, I made a phone call to Admiral Manoharavati, and thanked him for helping me this far in the voyage. After rounding Cape Horn, we were in the Atlantic. We had already done 12,000 miles of sailing. Another 12,000 miles, we would be home. I decided to push the boat hard and make it cross the Atlantic as quickly as possible. It was in the crossing of the Atlantic that I celebrated my 34th birthday as we passed 34 degrees west. We celebrated the boat's birthday as she passed 4 degrees west, and we both celebrated Valentine's Day as we are crossing the prime meridian, 0 degrees west and 0 degrees east. Next up was the rounding of Cape of Good Hope. Cape of Good Hope is known as the graveyard of ships or the Cape of Storms, and there is a reason why. Some freak weather phenomenon cause waves as high as 100 feet in these regions. If a boat or a ship climbs this wave, it is bound to belly flop almost 100 feet, break into pieces, and just sink. I stayed almost 200 miles south of this great cape, but I was still struck by a storm which tore a big sail in my boat. As I got into the Indian Ocean, I was told that there would be a cyclone called Haruna which would batter Madagascar. This cyclone, which was only a prediction, became a reality. It had more than 100 knot of winds inside with 15-meter high waves. It killed a lot of people in Madagascar. I escaped it by keeping myself at 42 degrees south and heading towards Australia. Once the storm subsided, I turned north and headed towards India. As I sailed north, I passed the islands of Mauritius on Mauritius National Day, and it was here that I sighted the first vessel since I rounded Cape Horn. This ship's name was MOL Distinction. The ship's watchkeeper appeared to be very bored and he wanted to make light conversation. He called me up on my VHF and he asked me, "Sailing vessel, you seem to be heading north. What's your destination?" I said, "Mumbai." He said, "If Mumbai is your destination, what's your port of departure?" I said, "Mumbai." He said, "If Mumbai is your port of departure, what's your destination?" I said, "Mumbai." He said, "If Mumbai is your destination, what's your port of departure?" I again said, "Mumbai." Finally, I really didn't want to cause any further confusion. I told him that I am undertaking this single-handed non-stop circumnavigation of the earth. I started from Mumbai and I'm finishing in Mumbai. I've already spent 4 months at sea and I'm left with just 1 more month. I've already rounded the 3 great capes. I've been chased by whales and dolphins and albatrosses and whatnot. When he heard this, there was a moment of silence and he understood. He kind of understood what I was trying to tell him. In the trade winds after crossing Mauritius, I was checking the bilges when I saw that a lot of diesel had leaked into the bilges. This diesel had gone into my water tanks and my water tanks were totally contaminated. Now I had stored water bottles in the boat, but when I opened these water bottles, I realized that diesel had entered these water bottles as well. The RO plant that converts seawater to fresh water had stopped working almost at the time I was rounding New Zealand. So that was also out. Finally, I mustered all the bottles of water that I thought were fit for consumption, and I realized that I was left with just 15 liters of water. Now, 15 liters of water for 15 days of sailing, that's what I anticipated. It would take another 15 days for me to reach Mumbai. How do you manage? I started going to the loo with seawater. I started doing the dishes with seawater. I started taking bath with seawater. I started washing clothes with seawater. I was brushing my teeth with seawater. I even started soaking dal in seawater. I was cleaning rice in seawater. And with all these efforts, I managed to reduce the consumption of fresh water to less than 1 liter per day. And whenever it rained, I would put a bucket out and gather some water, and I gathered 10 liters of water from passing showers. With 10 plus 15, I had 25 liters of water with me, and I could be at sea for 25 days. We crossed the equator on the spring equinox, the day on which the sun crosses from the southern hemisphere to the northern hemisphere. And like that, after a gap of 150 days and 7 hours, we sighted the skyline of Mumbai, and I was back. 6 days later, I was asked to take my boat and leave from the naval dockyard. I was told to come back at 3 p.m. alongside the Gateway of India. And when I came back, what do I see? As I march up the steps of the Gateway of India, I see that the President of India himself had come down to give me a ceremonial reception. That was something really big, because probably this was the first time that the President of India was receiving somebody outside of Rashtrapati Bhavan. That's how Sagar Parikrama 2 ended. I became the second Asian, the first Indian, and the 79th person in the world to have successfully completed a single-handed non-stop circumnavigation of the Earth. I was awarded the Kirti Chakra, the Tenzing Norgay National Adventure Award, the McGregor Medal for Military Reconnaissance, etc. Sagar Parikrama 2 was not the end of my adventures. A couple of years later, I was already preparing to be part of the Golden Globe race of 2018. The history of the race starts with Sir Francis Chichester sailing around the world in a sailboat with just one stop. When he came back, he was immediately knighted. That led to a competition among sailors to figure out who would be the first person to do a solo non-stop circumnavigation of the Earth. A race was declared by the Sunday Times. It was called the Sunday Times Golden Globe Race of 1968. 9 men entered the race. Out of the 9 men, only one person finished. His name was Robin Knox Johnston, and he had built his boat in India in Bombay. His boat's name was Soheli. Of the other 8 entrants, one committed suicide. Another lost his boat just 1,000 miles to the finish. He came back, and a couple of years later he committed suicide. Morticia sailed around the world, and instead of finishing, he decided to sail once again around the world, and he settled down in Tahiti. In his own words, he did all this to save his own soul. The race was never repeated, but in 2018, it was decided to have the race once more as a tribute to Sir Robin Knox Johnston. The rules of the race were pretty simple. Entrants had to start from France, a town called La Sable d'Olonne. We had to sail on very small boats, 32 to 36 foot, classic long keel boats with hinged rudder, and most importantly, we could not use technology that did not exist in 1968. It automatically meant that GPS would be out, no electronic watches, no electronic clocks, no electronic charts, no satellite communication, no talking to your family, nothing. This would be a single-handed, non-stop circumnavigation race. I put my name in, and immediately I got a special invitation. I was the only special invitee from all of Asia. I built a replica of Sir Robin's boat, put it in a ship, and sent it to the Netherlands, where I finished its construction, sailed to Falmouth, and at Falmouth we had a series of events. Robin came to check out this boat. Now, I had entered the race with a replica of Robin's boat. Robin had sailed around the world in 312 days. He came to my boat and he asked me, "Young man, how long do you think you're going to take to finish this race?" I said 311, sir. 1 day less than his. He looks at me and he tells me, "You're young and ambitious." I looked back at him and I told him, "Sir, you're old and jealous." Well, we had a series of inspections and classroom sessions at Falmouth, and we had a little race from Falmouth to Les Sables d'Olonne. Spent a couple of weeks in Les Sables d'Olonne, and from there, 18 of us started the race. Before the first gate at the Canary Islands, 4 of us decided to retire, and out of the 18, only 14 were left in the fray. The fleet soon split after the Canaries. There was one part which headed straight towards Cape of Good Hope, dead south, and I took the western route, hitting the coast of, going closer towards the coast of Brazil. This gambit paid off because from 11th position, which I was in when I passed the Canaries gate, I shot up to 3rd position after a total of 82 days of sailing. But that is when tragedy struck. 3 of us, Gregor, myself, and Mark Slatz, were struck by a very bad storm. And in that storm, Mark Slatz's boat got knocked down and he lost his mast. My boat was knocked down twice, and in the second knockdown, I had a fall of almost 10 meters and I landed on a piece of aluminium. It was an aluminium pole. I landed on that aluminium pole on my back and I fractured my spine. I crawled inside the boat and secured myself on the bunk and sent a text message to the race organizers telling them that my spine was injured and I needed help. That was when the biggest search and rescue effort of this decade, perhaps of this century, was set in motion. The Indian Navy immediately took the lead and launched a P-8I to fly over at me. I was also given to understand that a P-8 from Reunion Island, belonging to the Royal Australian Air Force, also came and located me. The Australians directed the French fisheries fishing vessel Osiris to come towards me. Now, Osiris was almost 1,000 kilometers from my position. It took them 3 days to reach me. In the meantime, Gregor, who was behind me, had rigged up a jury rig and he was sailing towards me. Finally, it was Osiris which reached and picked me out of the boat. In those 3 days, when I was confined to the boat, I could not move. I could not eat anything. I was constantly vomiting, suffering from hiccups, and of course the pain of the fractured spine. The accident happened on the 21st of September 2018. I was picked up by Osiris on 23rd of September. They dropped me at Ile Amsterdam, which is part of the French sub-Antarctic territories, on the 24th of September. I was on that island till the 28th of September when INS Satpura arrived. They picked me up from Amsterdam Island and took me to India. I reached India, Visakhapatnam, on the 5th of October, where I underwent the first MRI scan, which revealed 4 fractures to my spine. The Navy immediately put me in a Dornier and sent me to Delhi, where I underwent surgery, and my spine was fixed with 2 titanium rods and 8 pedicle screws. 5 vertebrae were fused. I was discharged after a week or 2. I was given 2 months to recover, and on the 24th of December 2018, I joined back duty. In 6 months, the Navy declared me fit to fly, and now it is my intention to take part in the next Golden Globe race, which will be in 2022. Thank you very much. Thank you.